I don't know what they talking about, but we here to stay. This ain't for play. This talks radio. In and out, up and around, down and out, backwards and forwards. We still stand tall. Talks radio. Tevin West. The best. I got more flavors than Baskin Robbins. You understand me? Chill.
What's going on, people? It's your boy, Tevin West. You're tuning in to Talks Radio, the show where we break down the hottest topics, debates, and everything in between. Now, today we got a juicy one for you. We're talking about sports, but not just any sports. We're diving into the massive, wild, and sometimes confusing differences between American sports and European sports programs. So just sit back while I talk about these things. So let's get into it. I mean, we all know sports can get a little complicated when we start comparing the U.S. to Europe. I mean, in the U.S., football is football in the story, right? But in Europe, it's soccer. That's the big sport. So let me back up, where I want to kind of start. And so here's the deal. In 1863, the Football Association that was born in England. And guess what? The first rule they laid down was no hands, because you apparently can't play with your hands using soccer or football for them. It was just a little too hands-on for them. So if you fast forward to like 1871, a bunch of people didn't really like those rules, so they split and created rugby football. And that's how we got this whole football versus rugby thing. Now, if you take a look at this bad boy across the Atlantic Ocean, which would be American football, well, it's basically a mix of association football, which would be soccer, and rugby. And we all know it quickly became like a big deal over here. I mean, we call ourselves the world champions when we won the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, the soccer just kind of stuck around, as a second tier sport. I really wouldn't even call soccer in America a second tier sport. It's like a fourth or fifth. It's behind golf. It's behind hockey. I mean, even though we are the country that got third place in the first ever World Cup in 1930, I think it's definitely behind. But that's not where the difference is in. So we're really just getting started. So we talk about grassroots sports, where it all begins in the U.S. Like sports development is like, we'll call it school central. So when you want to play basketball or football or even baseball, I think you're going to hit the gym, the school, you're going to be playing for your school or college. That's where scouts come to snatch you up for the big leagues if you're good enough, of course. And then we got some clubs and recreational centers, but let's be real, they're not really the main game in town. Schools run the show. I know for a lot of soccer players, this transition could be very hard for people who got real hoop dreams. Hoop dreams is like you want to be a professional athlete. Soccer players is very, very difficult. You get into the system of soccer, and a lot of players see the path like how Americans in football and basketball, they go D1 and then they get into the pros. They got that same system here. People play D1 and they get picked for the pros, but it's just such a large swath of schooling and decision and talents that, it's a lot of relationships that go underhanded, that under the radar, that you don't see. A lot of people who showed up on the scene to, in the professional scenes in college, just like sometimes they don't always necessarily belong on that stage, but they had a good agent and they had a good connection. So they was able to get through and break through the draft and stuff. Some people, went over to Europe for some time, but it can be a little different in soccer because, getting an MLS draft pick is so arbitrary. You could be at Drake University, you could be at Clemson, you could be at Duke, you could be at Brown University, Lehigh, but a lot of the people they pick come from Division I schools. I've seen a couple come from Division II, Division III, even NAIA. But over in Europe, it's not like that. It's a whole different vibe. Schools, like, you can forget schools trying to control everything. In Europe's clubs and associations are real heavyweights. They bring in young talent, they train them, and they work them all the way up through the youth system in the pro leagues. Yeah, yeah. I don't think schools are that much in charge when it comes to overseas. Kids join club outside of school to pursue their passions. And, as far as the government goes, they're involved too, supporting the clubs like crazy. It's like a big difference. It's a big difference in Europe, man. You got, for example, in the Russian Premier League, and I have a international audience in Russia. Forgive me if I mess this up, but you got teams like Spartak Moscow, CSK Moscow, and you got another team over there too. It might be Lokomotiv, or it might be Lokomotiv. So, and forgive me, I could be wrong on this, but I know Lokomotiv, all these teams are supported by specific classes of society. CSK Moscow is usually supported by the politicians, the people in the military garb that that hold a high rank. That's usually who CSK Moscow is. So the Kremlin, it's pretty much associated with the top dogs, so high fashion type stuff. You got Spartak Moscow. I want to say Spartak Moscow is like, it could be either the club for the people, the everyday working class, or it could be a club for the cops. I'm not sure. I think it might be Diana Moscow that might be the club for the cops, because they have clubs that are associated with first responders. And they also have Lokomotiv, which is like, Lokomotiv is tied in heavy with the railway industry in Russia too, if I'm not mistaken. So you got different. The government is very heavily involved in soccer, in the professional ranks, and all through it, really. So yeah, you got money's being put into these clubs, and the government is with it, as opposed to, like, when you talk about America, man, like, the government isn't a part of that. It's very privatized. Like, you pay this amount of money to get into this travel club, and, like, we'll keep you. And if you can keep paying the money, you can keep playing. If you can't, we put you on scholarship, whatever. A lot of the players here in Georgia, for example, like, they go play in Atlanta if they're good enough. Not only if they're good enough though, but they got to have the funds to get up there. They got to have a car to get up there. If they don't have a car, they might be going with a friend. Maybe a friend is good enough to go up there and play for those teams too. And they rock it out. They go up there 2 or 3 times a week. I know a couple people that go up there 2, 3 times a week. I know one of them, he actually ended up making professional, getting in the academy in Atlanta. So it's different here. But in Europe, back in the day, both Europe and the U.S. schools were starting to gain traction as places of importance. And in the U.S., they didn't like the way of clubs getting in the way of. They didn't like that clubs, like soccer, was getting in the way. Sports was getting in the way of academics. Like, when you get injured playing sport, and your GPA could take a nosedive because you're recovering. So schools expected to own the whole sports scene. Extracurriculars, became a thing. All to do to keep track on the kids. That's how it is in America. Meanwhile, in Europe, the schools didn't try to control the students that much. So the young people pursued sports through club. They were all about letting kids have their freedom to choose. No big government intervention here when it came to, like, paying attention to kids, having a hold on them and stuff. It's something about the education system here that really just kind of. So it wasn't necessarily. It's not when they say big government. It's like education system wise. In Europe, it's like you get to choose a path. You're gonna be a sports person, or you're gonna be like a school educated person. But here, it's like everybody's gonna be educated here. So there's an oversaturation. There's an oversaturation of education because they told every Gen X parent has told their kid to go to college. I don't care who you are. You told them, go to college or get you a trade. And the millennial generation were raised to go to a 4-year school, especially if you got hoop dreams too. But a lot of the kids that are getting older now, they're realizing, like, oh, I don't have to go to school I don't have to go to school to play sports. Like, we didn't really realize that. We didn't realize we could just, like, get a job and just play sports. Kind of thought you had to go to college to play sports, like, competitively, but there's so many more doors that are opening up for professional sports, or just like playing sports in general, that you don't really need to go to college if you don't want to. Let's talk about the league systems because that's a whole nother can of worms. So in the U.S., um, like the U.S. is like a VIP club when it comes to sports, like professional sports. Like once you're in, you're in. It's like an exclusive club. Like once you can get over that threshold in playing professional sports, you're in. You're pretty much in. I mean, you gotta perform and stuff and do your thing, but I mean, if you're getting in there, you ain't getting in there by the skin of your teeth. You're getting in there because somebody thinks that you really can work out, and then from there you get your shots and whatever you do with your shots, that's how long your career goes. So where your team stays in, that league forever, and there's no relegation, there's no falling off the map. You're secure in the league. Your fans never have to worry about not having a team to root for. But in Europe, it's all about merit. When you're talking open leagues, if your team stinks it up, you know what I mean? Guess what? You know what I'm saying? You're getting relegated. So you're going down to a lower division. And if you're killing it in a lower division, you might just get promoted. It's the ultimate high stakes drama every season. The biggest game that they play in Europe is the biggest game they bet on. And they've been betting on this game way before they even allowed betting in America. It's the championship game, the EFL championship. They used to call it. So it used to be the old Coca-Cola Empower Championship back in the day when I was coming up, but it's EFL now, and it's when the Championship League, the second league in England, they have like a promotion championship game, and that game determines what teams go to the get promoted to the highest league in English soccer, which is the Premier League. It's the most betted on game in the world. Everybody wants to see who's going to go to the Premier League every year. So it's not like that over here, though. There's no league that they all buy into closed-in systems, so their investments are stable. So there's no losing other countries. Like when they go down, like if Manchester United were to go down, like they would lose Cooks, they would lose, probably not overnight, but they would lose their TV deals. They would lose the revenue from their TV deals. They would lose the revenue from certain sponsors because they're not going to want to sponsor them since they're in a lower league, even though it's only the second league. They're going to lose over time. If they can't get back up, they're going to lose quality. All those masseuse and all those extra things that the creature comforts, and it can happen. So it's not like that over here. The worst team gets the first draft pick all the time. Let's not forget about the governing bodies, the people who, control these actual leagues. In Europe, you've got international bodies running the show. The governments, there are a ton of clubs and it's global. Every country's got its own scene, whether it's and they all play nice together. You could be a team in Manchester United having to go play against, Ruben Kazan or, Sheriffs over there in Moldova, I think. Or you could be, be having to play against, you might have to be playing against Barcelona. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the, or Red Bull Salzburg. And it all lines up nice because it's really hard. Those games turn different. The closest thing you have over here for soccer is like a Champions League in North America, Central America. They do that thing, but it's new compared to what the UEFA has. But in the US, like I said, to just cap it off, it's a bunch of, like I said, it's a bunch of big national leagues doing their own thing. The NBA, the NFL, MLB, they all work independently. No big international bodies to unite them all. It's more of a commercialized, profit driven. And that's how an American model just rolls, cha-ching. Now, don't get me wrong, both systems have their perks. The U.S. loves stability and the security of a closed system. The European leagues thrive on competition and merit and keeping it fresh with the new teams climbing to the top. But here's the kicker, my people. Things are changing. So the globalization wave is crashing into both systems. The NBA is putting its foot on the gas and expanding it into places like Europe and Asia. With global games, NFL, they've been pushing their big thing with the UK, NFL, London. They be having games over there. I know they had a game at Tottenham Stadium. They removed the grass, and at the lower level, they have turf already ready. And over in Europe, the clubs, they're getting pretty cozy with big money and record deals, signing players and transfers and partnerships with top brands. It's all about the money, man. They're getting pretty comfortable over there with what they got. They tried to create a closed league too. They tried to create a super league, but their people didn't want it. So where does this leave us? Well, let's just say between these two worlds, you're getting a little blurry. It's a game of sports chess. Who's going to make the big move? We'll have to wait and see. And for me, there's a new league that's coming, and it's the USL, which is historically a second division in the US to the MLS. It's United Soccer Leagues, and they're creating a promotion and relegation uh, system where they're going to have a top division. Then they'll have, from what I understand, it's like the championship. Then they'll have their League One, which is their second. And then I think they're going to have another league to fill that hole as well. Right now, that hole would technically be USL 2, which is not fully professional. It's a breeding ground for amateur soccer players to test. It's basically like an internship for guys who want to play at the next level, see if they're really committed. Because what'll happen is in soccer, after the college season, which is usually in the fall, what'll happen is they'll come back for spring and play an official season in the spring. And then when the summer comes, those players will transfer over. The players that want to continue playing, they'll go talk to their coach, or some of them might even have an agent. And that's been happening before NIL. Someone might even have an agent and is like, hey, I need you to put me on one of those USL summer league teams so I can get seen. That's how you get seen. That's pretty much your internship. And you play for that team for 4 years or whatever, and wherever it is, it could be in Pennsylvania, it could be in Washington State. A lot of those USL teams are affiliated with professional teams. And what happens is when those games are being played, the professional teams that are affiliated with those USL League 2 teams will come out and they will survey all the players that are playing in those games, and they will decide what they want out of those picks. I read a stat, it was like 70% of the MLS's talent has played at least 1 or 2 games in USL League 2. So it's one of those things where you can get yourself seen about, and you could play for anybody, really. There's a little political too there, because you could end up on a USL League 2 team and the coach really not be messing with you like that, and you're not getting any playing time, so you're not getting seen in there either. It's a political game as well as there. It's a political game to make some of those teams too, because for them, you got to be coming ended. A lot of them. I went to go train for one of those teams and try out for one of those teams, and I had tried out for about 4 or 5 of them that summer season, just trying to get on. I've never been on a summer team. The closest I got was an academy team that I played on, but it wasn't the summer team. It was an academy of the summer team. So like a B team for them. But I was training with them one day or trying out. I'm like, hey man, I got a lot of stuff going on. You see what I got going on, man? Like, what do I need to do to make one of these teams? And they was just flat out was like, I don't really know much about goalkeepers. We just get our goalkeepers from recommendations. And so when you got things like that, where it's like, even if you come out and you do your thing, you got to make sure that you not only stand out, but you have a connection there as well. Because everything in life is about relationships. If you ain't got no relationship with a certain type of person, then you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, you could be one of those people that made it on your own, but a lot of times, like, your raw talent won't carry you. It's just too much people are looking for at one time, Got to build those relationships. But all right, folks, that's all I got for today. Sports in the U.S. versus everywhere in the world. I was mostly talking about Europe, but all these things, they pertain to Latin America. They pertain to Africa as well. They pertain to Oceania. A lot of these policies of promotion and relegation have been adapted in most parts of the world except for the U.S. actually, and probably different in Canada too, because they have a CPL league, the Canadian Premier League, that hasn't been up and running too long, so they haven't been able to implement a promotion relegation system. But whether you're repping American football, European soccer, or el football in other countries or whatever, something in between, sports have a way of bringing us together. Thanks for having me today. This is Tevin West. You've been listening to Talks Radio. Stay tuned, stay wild. And as always, keep your game tight. I'm out.